Hello and welcome to the Care It Out Sleep Show, a podcast for tired parents who are searching for a bit more sleep the caring way. I'm your host, Kerry Secker, infant sleep consultant, founder of my unique sleep approach, Care It Out, and your caring sleep supporter. I really hope you'll join me on my mission to get Smalls a settled night's sleep without the tears, training or techniques. I love talking about sleep and I can't wait to share my sleep subjects with you. My approach to getting you more sleep is simple, straightforward, but above all, it's got to make sense and feel best for you. Ready to get more sleep? Then let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Care It Out Sleep Show. I hope you're all really well. Whether you are picking up this podcast for the first time or you're a seasoned sleep stalker and have listened to every single episode out there, I really hope you find this podcast useful, informative and reassuring as always. And today I've got a guest on the show. Her name is Lucy Neary from the Early Years Dietitian, and today the both of us are going to be talking all about the relationship between food and sleep. Hi Lucy, how are you?
Hi Kerry, I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very, very well there. I always get a little bit giggly and a bit tongue-tied when I have to introduce a guest. I don't know, it's pathetic. I don't know why. But how are you? Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been a long time, hasn't it, actually, since we've caught up. I've been looking forward to it, actually. I feel like there is so much for us to talk about. So, yeah, it's going to be good.
Yeah, Lucy, I love you. I mean, we go back a long way. Lucy, if any of you have been following me for a while, you'd know that I used to have a radio show on UK Health Radio. That's going back some years ago now. That's crazy. And you came on to do a show there.
I did, yes. Gosh, it feels like another lifetime ago, doesn't it, actually?
It must be a good 2 to 3 years. So it's still out. Yeah. Because I was looking at something today, so it's still out there. But we go back a long way. I love your whole approach, Lucy, to food, eating, diet. I absolutely love it. And really, really looking forward to talking today. I've got a massive long list, you'll be pleased to know. But before we crack on, tell us a little bit about... Sorry, say that again?
It's a mutual love, by the way.
Yay, I love a bit of lady love. Before we go on to answering all the questions and going through everything, tell us a little bit about yourself, Lucy, and tell us about the Early Years Dietitian.
So I am obviously Lucy. I am a paediatric dietitian, and honestly, I think anyone that knows me well knows that this is my perfect job. I absolutely adore what I do. I am a mum of 3, so I've got a stepdaughter and 2 children, and I work in the NHS. So I work with lots of children, all kinds of different things. So lots and lots of childhood nutrition in the hospital. And yes, I also run the Early Years Dietitian. So I do weaning workshops. I do work with lots of fussy eaters and problem feeders. I work with children with growth issues. So yeah, and I do sort of lots of social media and helping people in that way. And I've got loads of stuff coming, actually. I'm doing lots of studying at the moment. So I'm studying all around really sort of extreme picky eaters and eating disorders in children. So I've got lots of exciting stuff that's going to kind of launch over the next couple of months, which will be good.
Oh, that sounds really exciting, and I'll be definitely tapping into your wealth of knowledge there, Lucy. And I just want to say big up for having the perfect job as well. I think it's so important. It's so lovely when you feel that you are doing the perfect role for you. And I feel exactly the same. My job brings me so much job joy every day. It sort of gets me out of bed, and I love it.
Yeah, and do you know what? It feels like a real privilege as well. Like I'm so aware of how lucky I am to have found something that fits me so well. So it's a joy, actually. I love it.
Yeah, I get that too. Well, what I will do is at the end or on the show notes, I will put on Lucy's Instagram. I will put all the links to how to go and find her and how to access her amazing resources. But let's crack on. What would you like to talk about first, Lucy?
I guess I suppose for me, a bit of an introduction really is to start, and then I guess thinking about your questions, that for me, what I really want us to do today is kind of give parents reassurance in a way, because so much stuff, I mean, you know, sleep is your area. So, but so many of the parents I speak to, they have so many worries about what they're doing with food, what they're doing with milk feeds, and if there's something that they're doing that is affecting sleep. So I think, you know, I just want to start by saying, yes, there are lots of things to think about, and we're obviously going to talk them through today. But actually, I kind of want mums especially, but parents to have a reassurance that not everything is food related. And I think sometimes people spend a long time on trying to unpick that they're doing something, and actually a lot of the time they can't find it because it isn't there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense to me. And that's one of the many things I love about you, Lucy, again. But one thing that I want parents to get out of anything I put out there, whether it's these podcast content, it's always reassurance. I am here for it all. It's all about reassurance with me. And I completely agree too that quite often, I call it clutching at sleep straws. You might have a word that you use it for your own, but quite often parents get really focused down on looking for something, like with the food, with the overtiredness, with naps, whatever you're looking at, and really pick that apart to see what is going on with the sleep. And it's normal. It's telling a parent not to worry. It's like telling me not to eat cake. It's never going to happen. Never going to happen. And it's normal to try and look for something, but I completely agree with you. Sometimes that answer isn't there. And also, when it comes to sleep, it isn't just, it's like most things infant related, it isn't just one small thing. An unsettled night's sleep is built up on lots of different layers, and there's very rarely one reason why they are waking up at night time. And it's really interesting because everybody usually wants to tell me about their food journey or how they're eating, and I do ask, because if I'm sure we'll get onto it, but if they're everything is linked for infants, so food, diet, going to the toilet, pooping, sleep, behavior, as you know, Lucy, and if one of those gets knocked off, it has a knock-on impact on everything else. It's like a domino impact. But for me, it's really important to look at everything all together. Sorry, go on.
No, I'm agreeing. Absolutely. You have to look at the full picture, don't you? And it's when you start unpicking that you discover, here's what we're looking for. Yeah.
I love those aha moments. And it's often a massive shock to parents when I don't ask for a food diary, when I don't pay too much attention to food, because believe it or not, food is the very last reason I would look at behind an unsettled night's sleep. It plays a part because everything's linked, but it's not going to be the number one reason behind an unsettled night's sleep. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you know what? I was just going to say, I'm so happy to hear that you do not ask for a food diary, because it, like you say, it is the last thing that you would look at generally if you've got a child.
It's stressful, Lucy. It's so parents, when they've reached out for support, and I'm sure you find it with the families you work with, you're already tired. You're already at that point where the panic is at its peak, or the worrying is becoming a bit all-consuming. So getting them to really focus down on something and keep a diary. I don't ask them to keep a food diary. I don't ask them to keep a sleep diary either, believe it or not. It's so very rarely needed.
Yeah. Focusing too much on the tiny details, I think sometimes reinforces parents' anxieties. Because, for example, if you send out a food diary, what does that tell those parents? If they weren't thinking about food, now all of a sudden they're thinking, oh my God, food's linked. And then it's another.
I agree. It's important to look at everything all together, and that often does that's often quite a bit of a shock. Parents are very keen, especially the sleep. They want to tell me what's going on at night time, to the exact hour, how long they're awake for. But actually that's a symptom of something that's going on in the setup. It's not actually the reason why they're up at night. It's fascinating.
Exactly the same for me, to be honest. I think sometimes parents are surprised with the types of questions that I'm asking them, and they're kind of like, why is this relevant? And it's like,
I'd love to see your thoughts. I do ask some really interesting questions, like child's personality, birth, pregnancy, and partly it is because I'm really nosy and I do like to know everything, but it's really insightful. It really helps me get to know you, and sometimes these tiny little things can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Yeah,
definitely. I forgot where we were going with that, Lucy. What we were doing an introduction. About how food, it's important not to always focus too much on it.
I think you were just going to start firing questions at me.
So I just go for it. I like the idea of just firing questions. How important is, like, we know food and sleep is linked and related, like we were saying earlier. Like sometimes if I've been to the gym or I've been for a run or I've not eaten, like I wake up starving the next day, or I can't sleep, I wake up at 4 a.m. because I'm hungry. So we know it's all linked and there's a relationship, but just how important is food when it comes to sleep?
Okay. So there's kind of different ways of thinking about it, and as always it's going to vary from child to child. Okay, so I think if you were just saying to me, like you are, a blanket, how important is food and sleep, I would probably say not hugely important. I think often parents put more emphasis on it than I ever would, for example. And when it comes to things like children not sleeping, for example, if we're thinking about infants and toddlers not sleeping, a lot of times parents attribute that to, are they eating enough? And what I do see a lot is parents kind of they're speculating basically. So parents might be giving, really big bedtime snacks, still giving lots of milk in toddlerhood, for example. And I will say, oh, how comes you're doing that? And they'll say, oh, because if I don't do it, they'll wake up. And when I say, well, have you ever not given it? And they're kind of like, well, no, I haven't done that. And we sort of discussed the fact that actually there's probably not a link. When it comes to infants, sometimes it is important. So there would be different ways that might affect children sleeping, and that would be, for me personally, if I'm working with children, infants that have reflux, for example, that might have a big impact on their sleep. If we were thinking about children with food allergy, things like that, where if the food is going to cause some kind of symptom or some kind of upset, then yes, the sleep would maybe be affected and the food would be important. But for your average infant and child that has no kind of medical issues, no reason for that food to give them any problems, then actually I would not relate the food to the sleep as much as lots of parents tend to.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I do wonder wwhere that obsession, like I hear it all the time in parenting communities and from parents, like we've got to stuff them during the day, stuff. It's because they're not eating enough, they've not had enough dinner. Like, where does that come from?
So do you know what? And so I was actually just going to come on and say this. So there is a link between, so if we kind of take it right back to the beginning, and as humans, and so babies and children, particularly children under about the age of 5, are very, very good at regulating their own intake. Okay. And we know that babies know how much food they need. Okay. And they regulate their intake over about a week or more, maybe. So babies do drink milk to their own appetite. So it stands to reason that if they're not eating enough during the daytime, they are going to wake up more at night. Okay, so that message obviously kind of in some ways gets put across, and it is left over from just things that we used to do a long time ago. But if we flip that on its head completely and say that actually we know that the vast majority, so in the UK, for example, we look at it every year, and last year 79% of parents were overfeeding their children. So although, yes, we know that if you don't eat enough in the daytime, you may be more likely to wake up at night, we also know that there are very, very, very few children that would be applicable to, because most children are eating enough. And then from a sleep point of view, we also know that even the babies that feed more in the daytime and then don't wake up, that then don't need to feed at night, what the research shows us is those babies don't feed at night, but they still wake up. So, it's kind of, okay, yes, so we can say that if a baby gets enough energy throughout the daytime, they may not need feeding at night, but yeah, they're going to wake up anyway. And that's what the research shows us. So it's kind of, is it something that parents need to worry about? Probably not.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I think it is a bit of a balance. Like if there's a bit of food FOMO during the day, which is really common from 4 months, as you probably know. And I'm talking about milk feeds, and they're not having the feeds during the feeds during the day, then that can have a knock-on impact at night time, because then they'll want to feed more at night time. But it'd be interesting to hear your take on it, but I don't believe that you can, they've only got their stomach only has a certain capacity during the day, so we can't stuff them to make sure that that's going to prevent wake-ups at night time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, and you know what? It's so important that we feed infants and children to their own appetite. And you know, whether you're breastfeeding or you're bottle feeding, I mean, breastfeeding you absolutely can't, you know, I say force feed, but you know what I mean, kind of encourage more than a baby wants to. With bottle feeding, there's a tendency to kind of, if a baby has not taken the amount that they usually do, to keep going back to it, you know, kind of all the time once that bottle's, to get it in. And actually I would encourage, you know, all the parents that are listening to say, actually, once your baby has said, you know what, I'm full, I don't want it anymore, just get rid of that milk and don't keep going back to it. Because, you know, when you finish your dinner, if half of it is left, you don't keep going back over the next hour and going, okay, get this in, I need to get this in. Most people don't.
God, that's so true, Lucy.
And that's really, you know, we have to think about it in that way. And when we encourage babies to overeat, what happens is we have very, very clever like mechanisms in our bodies, hormones and all kinds of things, which I'm not going to get very technical about, but that basically tell us when we're full. And if parents start overriding those signals, babies get less good at doing it and children get less good at it. And so therefore what we then end up with is a child who doesn't know when they're full, and they then become an adult who can't regulate their intake, and they just eat and eat and eat until they're bursting. So, you know, it's just so much about starting as you mean to go on, worrying, you know, try not to speculate, well, that's going to happen if I don't do this, and just being led by the babies, which is, you know, what we ideally should be doing with so many things.
Yeah, it's hard not to preempt though, isn't it? Especially when it's the thought of your sleep being interrupted.
It really is, yeah. But it's, you know, and even if you, so the way I kind of always explain it is, especially if you're doing something to preempt. So for example, something like dream feeding would be a classic example of this. And I know for lots of parents, dream feeding works really well, and it's not a right or wrong thing. But what I would say is with anything like that, and it's the same with, if you know, people have got slightly older children who are having a snack, is, you know what, if you're just in the habit of doing it, stop doing it for a week. See, does it actually make any difference? And if it doesn't, then stop doing it, because that child actually isn't asking for that food, it's just being given it. So
makes total sense. And from a sleep perspective, overfeeding them, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because you're preempting it to prevent wake-ups from happening, but actually then they are in digestive discomfort. If they've got reflux, it can cause reflux to flare, and then that can have an impact on sleep as well. So that is something to bear in mind.
Yeah, totally. And also from a sort of, for me, from a parent point of view, this is nothing to do with sort of science and evidence, but you know, if you've got a baby and you've really overfed them, and then they wake up because they're uncomfortable, and like you say, maybe it's triggered their reflux because that is so volume led, and then baby in the night who's wide awake and uncomfortable and doesn't want milk because they're overfull and they're uncomfortable, and therefore you're probably one of your main ways of getting them back to sleep is on, you know. So it's you're kind of causing a problem, aren't you, when you don't need to, I suppose. But you know, I'm also, you know, I always come at this stuff from a realistic point of view as well, because, you know, I have children of my own, and I know that so many of the things that I probably thought, oh, I wouldn't do that, I was doing. So, you know, it's you do what you've got to do to survive, don't you, sometimes? So I love that you keep it real. I think it's so important for other parents to see other people sharing that and being honest and upfront. I think it's really important. And what I found really interesting actually is, touching very briefly on the dream feed, again, there's no right or wrong on my approach. That really is the very heart of care, the core of Care It Out. So having a dream feed I don't think there's right or wrong. If it works for you, carry on. But I've never
use a dream feed as a strategy at night time. I don't think I've ever said to a parent, let's introduce a dream feed, which is really, and I hadn't thought about it until you said the dream feed. But when you said then, I was like, do you know what? I don't ever suggest if they have a dream feed already and it's working for them, probably wouldn't change it. If they were asking me whether they wanted to introduce it, then I would say no. And for me, it's about making sure we were always listening to what the baby wants. Does that make sense? And if they're not waking up for it, then they, as far as I'm aware, that they don't need it. But I've never really, it wasn't until you said that it clicked it clicked with me there why I don't suggest the dream feed.
I'm exactly the same. So if someone's doing it, I won't say, oh, you must take it away. But I would never say to someone, lots of people ask me, oh, should I be doing a dream feed? And I just, no, because your baby's not waking up for that food. Yeah, I'm exactly the same. That's really interesting. I might even do a post on dream feed because I've never really thought about that. It sounds ridiculous. I've never really thought about it in that much detail. Oh my God, that like blows my mind.
No, because I would like food. It is important, but it's not that I don't use night weaning as a strategy. I don't use spacing feeds at night time. I just it's so very rare that I would get like that into the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah,
but it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I might even do one as well, you know, because I'm saying, oh, you've never done one, but I've never done one either, actually.
Yeah, maybe we can do a post together.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
And then you did mention it before. I must get this question asked every single day. On the daily, someone will ask me, is there a difference between a breastfed baby and a bottle-fed baby, or the way they sleep?
So there is a slight difference in the way they sleep, but the reason I think most parents ask this question, so I'm going to kind of reframe the question if you don't mind, is what the reason most people ask me is, or would come and ask about it, is because they want to know if formula fed or breastfed babies sleep more. And I know that certainly I come across lots of people that are questioning it because they're maybe being told, oh, the reason your baby doesn't sleep is because they're breastfed and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, and that is a real massive bugbear of mine, that I think everyone should do what they want to do. And it doesn't matter whether you choose to breastfeed or formula feed, but it should be your choice and you should not be made to feel like what you're doing is wrong. And so there's a kind of misconception that formula fed babies sleep longer and better. And actually what the research shows us that yes, formula fed babies do tend to sleep for longer periods of time without waking. But when they do wake, they're awake for longer than breastfed babies. So actually, when you look at the research and you unpick what's actually happening, yes, they sleep slightly differently, but they are actually not awake they're not sleeping for longer. So actually it's kind of swings and roundabouts. The research doesn't show us whether one is that breastfed or bottle fed babies are sleeping for longer than each other. They just possibly have slightly different sleep patterns. And also, you know, it's about remembering that, you know, all these babies are different, and, you know, there's so many variables, you know, there's so much more to it than is that breast milk or is it formula milk. When you put everything else together, you know, some parents find different things, but no, when you ask that question kind of as it is, no, there is not really a difference.
I think that's a fab answer, and I love you for saying that it's the most important thing is finding something that works for you. And from a sleep perspective, I have worked with I haven't seen any difference between the two. I've worked with breastfed babies that sleep through the night, or they just wake up for the feeds they need, they're at their biological best. And I've worked with bottle fed babies, formula fed babies who they're up long chunks of time, really sleep for frequent wake ups at night time. It works both ways, and for me it always depends on the baby.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're just going to keep coming back to this, aren't we?
I'm going to get a t-shirt printed, it depends on the baby.
Yes.
Say it all the time, but it's so true. And it comes back to again that it's food, I keep saying it plays a small part, but it won't be in the nitty gritty of why your baby is up, like having a parent party, for having a split night, not napping, or having frequent wake ups at night time.
Yeah,
really important. Another question, I get asked a lot of questions, Lucy, but I'm sure you probably do too, is when is the best age to drop night feeds and when to wean?
Okay, so yeah, I am going to definitely start this question with, it's going to depend on the baby. So okay, so I think the other thing to say about this as well, and I know this is also something that you say, so the night feeds is like everything else, that for me it's only a problem if it's a problem. So if a parent has a baby that is feeding in the night still and the parents are not bothered about that, the baby is quite happy, the baby is growing well, etc., then I see no reason to stop those night feeds, because there is no reason to stop them. However, if you've got a baby that is still waking at night lots, the parents are really stressed by it, or whatever is happening, and the parent's choice, they want to wean the baby off, then that's an entirely different thing. So there's a few things to think about. So first of all, I would say that the NHS kind of their stance on it, so the kind of guideline, I guess, of what we'd say is, you wouldn't really think about doing it before 6 months. And it's a really fluffy phrase that they use, that a 6 to 12 month baby may need milk at night, they may not. And by that, what do we read into it? That, I guess, what I've already said, if you feel that you really need to wean the night feeds off, then you can do. It's really important you think about other things as well. So, when you might need to consider are things like, is your baby growing well? If you've got a baby that is perhaps not growing as they should, they're not following their growth curve, it's maybe possible that they do still need those night feeds. So I would say, don't start weaning them off then. If you've got a baby, are they eating well during the daytime? So we've already said that, if you've got a baby that doesn't eat well during the day, actually, that might be why they're having more milk at night. From a breastfeeding point of view, it's, we would always say just breastfeed on demand. So, that it's fine to wean off if that's what you want to. What I find in my experience, and I don't know about the same with you, is that when people are talking about weaning off night feeds, it's more often bottle feeding that they're trying to kind of wean down. I don't know if that's your experience.
I actually find it more the other way.
Okay. That's fine. So I guess so with the breastfeeding, it's all the same thing. It's, you're fine to wean it off anytime from 6 months, providing that your baby is growing well, eating well in the daytime, etc. And I'm obviously not going to talk about how you necessarily would wean that down. And where I've just totally lost my train of thought then. And then I guess, it's talking about, and these would be the things that you would be thinking about, is, sometimes the night feeds it's not about the hunger. So they're not necessarily waking because they're hungry, but parents are using the feeding to get them back to sleep. And it is two quite different things. One is, okay, are they waking because they're hungry? And, sometimes we can unpick that. And if it is, or they're waking up naturally anyway, and we're feeding them to get them back to sleep, then it's thinking about, why are they waking? And, all sorts of things, I guess. It's, are they disturbed? Is it the temperature of the room? Are they not following your nap gaps, Kerry? But then it is thinking about, is there something else that's affecting them, why they need that milk at night time? And it may well be, if you've got a baby that's got uncontrolled reflux, they're going to be waking up much more. And often reflux babies want to feed more because that soothes, if they've got pain, it's quite soothing whilst they're drinking. It then causes more problems afterwards. But so the answer to the question is, and was the original question, when do they need to? It's going to be led by the baby, basically, in that, and if we kind of look at the stats, I suppose, like the studies on how, children do sleep, I think, only about 50% of babies at kind of 5-6 months are doing an 8-hour stretch. And actually, I think by a year, there's still only 75% of babies that are sleeping kind of an 8-hour period across the night. So, babies just wake up so much, don't they, naturally? So it's just about trying to pick apart, is that baby waking because they're hungry, or can they be soothed in another way? And in which case, if they can, yes, drop the night feeds.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic answer. And it's really similar to mine. I'm always going to reassurance first, always going to push that message that feeds at night time can never be a wrong thing to do or a bad habit. If you're happy, your baby's happy, it's working for them, you don't need to night wean until you are ready. And then if you do want to wean, I would always recommend waiting at least until they're on 3. They're getting enough during the day. So ideally, it's not about how much they eat, but the 3 meals have been established, because chances are once that happens, that can have an impact on the night feeds anyway. But interrupt and tell me if I'm completely wrong.
But I was going to say that, yes, it is. Once babies are on 3 meals a day, the thing is, we don't generally, we call it weaning, and it's confusing because weaning means taking something away. If we talk about complementary feeding, we complement the milk with the feed. And in general, we don't start to see babies starting to drop their milk really before about 9 months of age.
Yeah.
So, but we do tend to see when it does start dropping, often it is the night, because they're not waking up for it, know. There's so many variables, like we've said, how much milk do they take each time? How big are they going through a growth spurt? Are they eating well? And I guess the other thing, while we're on the milk at night time, is dropping milk is not linear. It doesn't always go down exactly and stay down. Some babies will drop milk at night, and then they might go through a growth spurt and their body's telling them, you know what, we need extra, and they'll wake up at night again for a couple of weeks. And and then I would say, your baby's waking up and you're kind of thinking, you know what, I think they're hungry, go back to giving them milk, because, a couple of weeks later, I think Woody did it actually, my youngest, at around 13 or 14 months, we all of a sudden had like 3 weeks where he just went back and he had a bottle halfway through the night.
Yeah.
And then, it's always listening to your baby and thinking, okay, and so many things are short term, aren't they?
Everything's temporary. Lucy, thank you so much for saying that, because there is so much pressure on parents to get babies sleeping through the night and dropping their night feeds. And I'm seeing this earlier, like parents get in contact with me at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks old, like they're still waking up for a feed. And it breaks and it's not their fault, it's just that we've got this really wildly unrealistic expectations of babies. They're behaving like babies. They need feeds at night time in the beginning. And if that pressure makes parents feel like they're doing something wrong if their baby's waking up to have a feed or they're not sleeping through. And I see parents do this. They tie themselves up in knots about, getting to a certain amount of a sleep stretch, or sleeping a certain hours at night time by a set age, or dropping feeds. So thank you so much for saying that the need for a feed at night time isn't linear, because I say it all the time, and hearing it from somebody, a professional such as yourself, it's so important that parents hear that, because it is really important. Like feeds, that quite often parents are that they want their babies to feed at a certain, and I get it, because we all like consistency, that they're going to wake up, that they're going to get to a certain number of feeds at night time and it's going to stay there, or they're going to feed at a set time at night time and it's not going to deviate. But babies aren't like that. Life isn't like that, and it is completely normal for them to go, for their feeds to be inconsistent at night. Some babies will fit. Some babies are like clockwork and they will wake up at set times for feeds, but that's definitely for some, not many. And for many, it's completely normal to feed at 10 p.m. one night and 3 a.m. the next. It's completely normal. And the other thing is, it's normal for their feeds it's not linear. Like they might completely wean for a little bit, then go back to it. The number of feeds might move around. So I, hand on heart, know, Lucy, that somebody listening today will have needed to have heard that.
And you know what, Kerry, the thing is, and I always, so much of what I talk to about parents, I always say, let's think about you. And if we think about it like that, and we think, how are we as as adults, some days I'm absolutely starving, and I'll wake up and I eat, a massive breakfast, and then I'll be thirsty in the day and I'll find, oh my God, I'm drinking loads today. And then I might take a drink to bed with me because I'm thirsty. And I might wake up in the nighttime and drink. And then other days I'll get up and I'm like, I'm not hungry today, I'm not going to have breakfast. And I might get fined, and I know it's really naughty and I'm a dietitian and I shouldn't, but I'll get to lunchtime and I'll think, oh God, I haven't even had a drink. And that's because my body is telling me, you need more today or you need less today. And it's so important that we understand that that's how it works, and allowing your baby to do that. And by listening to your baby, you are actually doing you're doing the right thing. So yeah, absolutely. You know, it's about listening to them, and it's never going to be the same every day for most people anyway.
But why do we, if you could see me, I'm literally grinning from ear to ear, like, yes, Lucy, like pumping the air. Like, it's just so refreshing to hear somebody say that, like, so refreshing. And yeah, we just expect ourselves, we're human beings, like, we expect ourselves to bring the same amount of energy and the same appetite and the same mood every day, where, like earlier before, for instance, I was literally about to chuck my laptop out of the window, and then some days I'm calm as can be. Like, we're different every day, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and it's so lovely to have this conversation, and it's nice to know that, because this one of like my main messages, and I know it is for you as well, that it takes pressure off of parents, doesn't it, to be able to say, you know what, it's absolutely fine that your baby doesn't do what your baby does.
Yeah, they don't do what the books say, or they're not I always like to say they're not baby robots.
That's what I always say. Yeah, they're not robots. They're not
robots.
I mean, I've never fitted in a box in my entire life, so I would never ever expect anybody else to be honest. So
yeah, me too, Lucy, me too. And it's completely the same. The other day I woke up at 3 a.m. in the morning starving. Well, it was quite a long time ago, so when the gym was open, and it's because I'd absolutely whipped it on the battle ropes and I hadn't eaten enough. So exactly. We're all the same. Two really quick questions before you go, because I know I am taking up a lot of your time.
No.
And these are quick ones. What's the best time for dinner? Should there be a set amount of time afterwards? And any particular foods to avoid at dinner?
No, do you know what? And this is something I do get asked as well, and I always hate the answer because it's just a nothing. In that there isn't really any set right or wrong. There's not a kind of, you know, oh, you really shouldn't be giving dinner within, you know, an hour of going to sleep, because, you know, if we flip it to the daytime, probably parents are not worrying about, oh, they've had lunch, I'm putting them down for a nap. It's, you know, it's the same thing. Nothing bad is going to happen, unless, of course, you do have a baby that does struggle with, you know, it comes again, but something like reflux, where, you know, we would say keep them upright for, you know, that's with a milk feed. But yeah, no, there is, you know, some babies. The other thing I would say is people often ask this question, and what I do say is, well, what time is your bedtime? You know, if your baby's getting ready and starting to go to bed and then you lay them down at about 7, you know, most babies want to be eating their food by somewhere around 5-ish, if not a little bit earlier for some babies. So, you know, if we feed babies at the dinner times that usually parents are feeding them at, and if that's like 5, 5:30, and then you kind of start bath time at 6:30, then that would be absolutely fine. There's really no right or wrong with it. Again, it's about, you know, if you notice that it's causing a problem, feed them a bit earlier. But no, I've never really come across babies that are struggling because parents are feeding them too close to bedtime. Unless
no, I haven't either.
Problems. Yeah, it's another one that we speculate that there's going to be a problem. And did you say, are there certain foods? Again, that would be a no. So unless you have you know, I mean, I'm going to use allergies. It's a terrible example, because if you know your child's got an allergy, you're clearly not going to give them that food. Reflux is, again, a slightly different kettle of fish, in that you know, you may find there's certain foods that trigger your baby's reflux, and therefore, you know, if you've given them, you might find that your baby's more unsettled and more uncomfortable during the night. But actually, there's tons and tons of stuff online about reflux foods that you should and shouldn't be having. But actually, the research really just shows us that it's very, very individual. So it may well be that you kind of know your child's triggers, in which case I would say, yeah, you know, you wouldn't be giving those at dinner time. But, you know, please, I can't stress enough to parents that are listening to say, please don't go online and just print off a list of foods that is going to cause a problem of reflux, because, you know, all babies are different, and some babies will be able to tolerate things that others can't. And, you know, actually we know that sometimes foods improve reflux. So no, it's about understanding your baby, actually. And unless there is a problem like that, absolutely not. There's nothing that's kind of off limits at dinner time, you know, other than a coffee, I suppose. But, you know.
Or a chocolate bar filled with coffee,
Or
too close to bed as I did last night.
Yeah, so no, there's not. And in some ways, I know parents like that answer, and in other ways, I know they don't, because they're like, oh, I wish they like. People like the security of like something they can do, don't they? But no.
Yeah. I think it's partly we like a plan. People like a plan, and that being in control about it. And
yeah.
I completely agree. I never ever really looked at the time that they're having dinner, unless they were. I like to say, unless they were having a full like 3-course meal with lobster, petit fours, like 2 hours before bed. Which, you know what, we laugh, but some smalls probably are having that. Then I would have a little bit of a break. And again, if there's reflux or there was foods we know cause a little bit of digestive discomfort, then I would be avoiding them.
Yeah, and yeah, you know, we do laugh, and I do come across lots of children that are having their dinner at 10 o'clock at night because they're not going to bed early. But you know, that's not about what the food is. That's much more about maybe we should change the routine anyway, and get them into a better routine. But yeah,
I agree. I could talk to you all day, Lucy. I've got so many ideas for future podcasts or posts if you're up for it. I'd love to do one. I know we've talked about it before, a reflux one. One that I hear all the time is parents are obsessed with wind, like getting wind out of their babies. They're waking up because they're farting. And do you know what? In some cases, there is trapped wind there, and that is excruciating, and I am talking from personal experience there. It's so sore, isn't it? So sore. But wind it's normal, and our digestive system knows what it's doing, and it's normal for tummies to gurgle and pass wind and pump at night and do all of those things. So I think that would either be a really nice post in a podcast, a reflux one, and then also just exploring bits that I think this has been, I've definitely learnt loads, Lucy, and I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing it with us. It's lovely. It's just so refreshing and so lovely to find another professional with the same. But we both do very different things, but ultimately we're both about reassuring parents in confident parent, looking out for them, getting it to work for you. It's so lovely.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, no, it's nice. We're very aligned in our values, aren't we? It's nice. I love it.
Definitely. And it's so nice. And I know, hands down, this will have helped some people listening today, like just letting go of that food, and sometimes just letting go of things. Yes, it's not going to make you any less tired as a parent or less frustrated, but it can go such a long way. You can stop worrying about the food bit.
Yeah, I do so much work with parents just literally around dealing with their kind of anxieties, because we know so much that the anxieties actually can fuel, you know, the feeding behaviours and things. So it's so important that we reassure parents and help them understand that, you know, there is no bog standard normal. It's just, you know, working towards.
It depends on the baby. We definitely need t-shirts. And the other one, what was I going to say? The other one I get quite a lot of, you know, it's so easy to look through things through a lens, so that it's everything. An unsettled night, it's all to do with the food, or it's all to do with wind, or it's all to do with naps, or it's all to do with how they go to sleep. So quite often, if they're slamming their legs or they're moving around a little bit, that can be very natural, normal baby behavior. But if you're worried about food and wind, every little leg lift, you're panicking that there's something, you know, there's something up there that you need to be working on. So an episode on that, I think, would be really helpful.
Really, yeah. And because you know what, and I actually had this conversation during a consultation last week, and the mums had said to me, oh, we're really concerned because at meal times the baby is making this noise, and you know, she's clearly really, and then the baby was making this noise, and I said, is that the noise you're talking about? And they said, yeah. And I said, that is just a normal baby noise. And I think, you know what, I'm really sorry, because I feel like we were going to get through a whole episode without talking about COVID, but I feel like that is something that we can attribute to COVID, because so many new parents have never been in a room with lots of other babies, and they don't know what is normal. And that for me is really heartbreaking, because we've got parents that feel anxiety over things that are just so normal, they just don't know it.
Yeah, I get the same. Like they'll be going, oh, they're really upset, and they are really crying, and then they'll give me like, or they're making a weird noise. You know, they're asking for support, or they're in pain, and then I'll be like, if parents are always the experts. So if you're telling me your child is in pain or they're crying, chances are that is what's going on. But send over a video just in case, and then I'll hear on the monitor, wah, wah.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it's just normal. Like it's normal, just completely normal. Please do the noise that what the baby was doing, because that might help some people.
She was just kind of going, really, to me, she was exploring her voice.
Yeah. Sometimes that can be tired talk as well, when it's like that one kind of noise. That can also be when they're getting a bit tired as well.
Okay, good to know.
Interesting.
Yes.
But very, very normal. I love it that we're now imitating babies. I think we should leave it there, Lucy.
Yes, with my baby.
Cool. Well, if anybody else wants to find out more about your services, what you offer, the early years dietitian, where can they find you?
So they can find me online at theearlyyearsdietitian.co.uk. They can find me on Instagram, and I am just the Early Years Dietitian. And then I am on Facebook as well. So I have a closed community Facebook group, which again is the Early Years Dietitian, where I do kind of lots of, videos, and people can post their questions. It's kind of a support group. So yeah, those are the three main ways of finding me.
Amazing. I'll put them in the show notes as well, because I'm definitely not going to remember them. I'll write them down and put them in the show notes. Lucy, thank you so much for coming on, talking to me and sharing your amazing insight, your job joy, and all your amazing knowledge. And I really hope you can come back soon.
Oh, thank you. It's been such a pleasure, honestly. And yes, let's definitely let's do it again soon. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to me, your host, Kerry Secker, on the Care It Out Sleep Show. I really hope you found this podcast episode reassuring, informative, but most importantly, it helps you and your small to a more settled night's sleep the caring way. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe to the show below, leave me some feedback, or share it with a parent pal. I love hearing that you love listening. My next podcast episode will be available in 2 weeks' time. But if you really can't wait that long, please come and find me over on Instagram at Care It Out Sleep Consultant. I update my sleep squares and speak about sleep there on the daily. Big love and sleep solidarity. Until next time.